What makes us uniquely human? This isn't an easy question, and there probably isn't just one answer. At an anatomical level, however, many neuroscientists agree that a big part of what's different about humans is our highly developed cerebral cortex. Cortex in humans is large for our body size, and certain regions of our brain, areas that, for instance, control our ability to reason and use language, are vastly larger and more developed than in our nearest primate cousins. We have cortex to thank for our ability to use logic to create highly advanced tools, to appreciate music and visual art. But our cortex is a relatively new development, and it's hardly the norm for nervous systems on Earth. The cortex comprises a surprisingly small fraction of the brain. Anatomically, cortex is a layer of cells a few millimeters thick. If we look at our very distant cousins, like reptiles or fish, their cortex is smaller, less important, and eventually absent altogether. There isn't really a sense in which a modern fish is more ancient than we are. Every species alive today represents nature's best current crack at adapting to some niche in the world as it is today. But there is a sense in which some animals have stuck with the older, tried and true designs, while other species have evolved new solutions. Interestingly, though, even as our own distant ancestors began to evolve the new structures that would become cortex, they didn't throw out the old parts of the brain, which have always done their jobs quite well. Rather, cerebral cortex ended up being more or less unceremoniously glommed on top of those more ancient structures, in addition rather than a replacement. Sort of like a new city that was built atop an old city without tearing down or even vacating the old one. And the old buried city keeps chugging along, taking care of business that it always has, while the new city upstairs reaches for loftier goals. As we excavate deeper, we discover still more ancient structures, also buried in previous rounds of evolutionary innovation, serving even more basic and essential functions. Make no mistake, every part of the brain is modern in the sense that it is all the product of evolution up to this point in time. But the architecture of the brain follows a remarkable gradient, playing out an evolutionary history from inside to out. In the deepest parts of our brain, in the brainstem, we find brain areas that control the absolute most critical functions, such as respiration. We share these regions in common with basically all vertebrates. Extending outward and forward in evolutionary time, we find a host of structures that allow us to orient to stimuli in our environments, to experience emotions, sex drive, hunger, and thirst. As we extend even farther outwards, we finally reach the cortex, sometimes called the neocortex, Latin for new cortex, acknowledging its relatively late arrival. While it's easy for us as humans to be cortex chauvinists, focusing on the wonders of our higher function, at a very basic level of functioning, you could live without your cerebral cortex, and an awful lot of animals do. But neither you nor these animals could live without the subcortical structures. In this section, we'll explore why. In our investigation, we'll divide the subcortical regions into three broad anatomical structures: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. These three structures separate from one another early in development, and each encompasses unique anatomical and functional substructures, some of which we've already encountered in earlier lessons.